Pick up the knife you cook with most nights. Look at the edge running along the blade. In a few years, one of two things will have happened to it. Either it is worn thin and tired, ground down a little too far by a gadget that took more than it needed every time, and you are standing in a store buying its replacement. Or it is still right here in your hand, keen and familiar, quietly outlasting every appliance on the counter. What decides which of those two futures you get is not the knife itself. It is a flat gray stone the Japanese have used for 800 years, and today it costs about $30. My grandmother kept one by the kitchen sink, and there is one step to using it that almost everyone skips now, and skipping it is the reason people try the old way once, decide it is a myth, and give up. Before we get to that step, let me put the money on the table, because that is the thing this plain gray stone is meant to replace. Start with the drawer sharpeners. The little plastic pull-through, the kind you drag a blade through a few times, runs somewhere from $10 to $50. It sounds harmless enough, but every pass through those hard crossed slots tears away a strip of steel at one fixed angle, far more metal than your knife ever needed to give up. Then there is the electric sharpener buzzing away on the counter, $50 to a couple hundred, doing the same aggressive grinding, only faster and with even less mercy. Run a knife through one of those a few too many times, and you can strip off enough steel to change the very shape of the blade. Then, once the gadget has finally chewed the edge past saving, there is the sharpening service. You hand your knives across a shop counter, pay a few dollars a blade, and collect them a week later. Handy once in a while, but it is a small bill that keeps coming back around every few months for as long as you own the knife. And here is the real cost, the one almost nobody adds up. A good kitchen knife should give you 10 years of daily use without complaint, and far longer than that if it is cared for. Instead, worn thin by the wrong tools, it gets tired early, and out it goes for a new one. So you buy the gadget, you pay the service, and then you buy the knife all over again anyway. The money leaves your wallet from 3 directions at once. Now set all of that beside the one thing it was built to replace. A single flat gray stone, a whetstone, around $30 bought one time. Sitting in a drawer, it draws nothing off the meter and mails you no bill. Used with a little care, it will still be laying a fine edge on your knives when that plastic gadget is long buried in a landfill. This is a tool you are meant to keep, not replace. That is close to the whole idea of it, and it is one of the oldest habits in the Japanese kitchen. So the obvious question is this: if a $30 stone does the job better and lasts for decades, why is it sitting in almost nobody's kitchen anymore? To answer that fairly, I had to stop leaning on my own childhood memory of it and go find out where this stone actually came from. In my grandmother's house, the stone lived in a wooden box beside the sink, and it came out about once a week. I can still see it. A plain rectangle of gray stone, dished a little in the middle from years of use, sitting in a shallow tray of water. She would soak it for a few minutes first, until the bubbles stopped rising off it. Then she laid it flat, took down the kitchen knife, and drew the blade across the wet stone in long, steady strokes, over and over, tipping it to the same low angle every time. There was a soft, rhythmic hiss to it, and a pale gray paste built up on the surface as she worked. It took her only a few minutes. Then she rinsed the blade, wiped it, and the knife went back to slicing a tomato so cleanly the skin never dimpled. To me, it was as ordinary as wiping down the counter. Nobody in that house owned a sharpener you plugged in, or one you dragged a knife through. There was the stone, and there was the person who knew how to use it, and that was the whole of it. For years, I filed that away under thrift, something my grandmother's generation did because they had grown up with little and could not stand to see a good knife go to waste. Worth respecting, I thought, but a habit from another time. So when I finally went looking into it as a grown man, half expecting to find nothing underneath but sentiment, what I turned up was older and far more deliberate than a frugal grandmother by a sink. The best of these stones came out of the hills just outside Kyoto. For centuries, that ring of small mountains was quarried for a fine natural sharpening stone the Japanese called to-ishi, which just means whetstone. The finishing stones from there even had their own name, Han-ya-ma, the true mountain stones, prized for laying the last and keenest edge on a blade, and the tradition around them runs deep. The old story attached to that name goes back to the late 12th century, more than 800 years ago, when a man named Hanma is said to have been put in charge of the local whetstone diggers in the years when the warlord Minamoto no Yoritomo was consolidating the power that would soon make him Japan's first shogun. I cannot promise you every detail of that old story is exact. What is not in doubt is the age of it. People have been quarrying and prizing these Kyoto sharpening stones for something close to 8 centuries. The stone itself is older still, by an almost absurd margin. What they were quarrying is hardened seafloor mud from an ancient ocean, packed with the microscopic skeletons of tiny sea creatures and pressed into fine, dense stone over stretches of time the mind cannot really hold. People were putting an edge on steel with a piece of the prehistoric seabed. So the thing by my grandmother's sink turned out to be the tail end of a craft with a written history and a geology reaching back before anything you could put a date to. Thrift had very little to do with where it came from. That settled where it came from. But an old story only tells you a thing once existed. What I really wanted to know was whether anyone still made these stones in real workshops today. And here the story took a turn I did not see coming. The finest natural stones from Kyoto were always expensive, uneven from one piece to the next, and hard to get hold of. So just after the Second World War, an Osaka company called Matsunaga set out to fix exactly that. Founded in 1948, they set to work on a synthetic stone, and by 1950 their first sharpening stones reached the market under a brand you can still buy on a shelf today. What they had managed was to take a craft that once belonged to Kyoto quarries and master carpenters and turn it into a steady, reliable stone any home cook could afford for the price of a nice dinner. More than 75 years later, that same company's stones are still one of the most popular whetstones in the world. The old knowledge never died. Somebody just made it cheap enough to keep. So what is really happening when you sharpen a knife? It helps to picture the edge up close. A sharp blade is 2 shallow slopes of steel that run down and meet at a single fine line, and that line is the edge. A dull knife is one where that fine line has worn round or folded over, so instead of a crisp meeting point, you have a soft rounded shoulder that pushes food instead of parting it. Sharpening is simply grinding those 2 slopes back down until they meet again at a clean, fine line. You are removing a little metal to rebuild the point where the 2 sides come together. And the finer and cleaner you make that meeting line, the sharper the knife, which is exactly why how much metal you take off matters so much. You want to remove just enough to rebuild the edge and not a scrap more. That is where the grit comes in. A coarser stone, somewhere around 1,000 grit, does the real cutting and shaping. A finer stone, several thousand grit, comes after and polishes that rebuilt edge until it is keener and smoother. Coarse sets the edge, fine refines it, and the stone tells you when each side is done if you know the signal to feel for. As you grind one slope down to the very edge, a tiny ragged lip of metal is pushed up along the other side. Sharpeners call it the burr or the wire edge. when you can feel that faint, rough lip running the whole length of the blade by dragging a thumb gently away from the edge, not along it, you know that side has reached the apex. Then you turn the knife over and raise the burr back the other way. That little burr is the honest feedback a plastic pull-through never gives you. It is the knife telling you the truth about where the edge is. Now, why water, and why this particular kind of stone? A classic Japanese soaking water stone is made of hard, sharp, abrasive grains, harder than the knife steel, held together in a soft binder, and you soak it until it is full of water. Here is the clever part. As you sharpen, the top grains do the cutting, and the moment they start to dull, that soft binder lets them crumble away and wash off, uncovering fresh, sharp grains underneath. The loosened grit and water build into that gray paste, the slurry, and it polishes as you go. So the stone is always handing you a fresh, sharp surface. That is why it cuts quickly and finishes finely, and why it feels almost alive under the blade. It gives up a little of itself with every knife you sharpen on it. Quick word before the how-to. This channel keeps a simple beat. One old, cheap, buy-once skill at a time. The kind that used to pass from a grandparent's hands without anybody making a speech about it. If that beat suits you, tap subscribe and let it turn up now and then. Now stay close, because this next part is the piece almost everyone gets wrong. Doing it yourself is far less fussy than people fear. Soak the stone in water for 5 to 10 minutes until the bubbles stop rising off it. Set it on something flat and steady with a damp cloth underneath so it cannot slide around. The angle is the thing beginners agonize over, so here is how to take the worry out of it. For most kitchen knives, you are aiming for something around 15 degrees off the stone, a touch more, nearer 20, for a heavier Western knife. You do not need a protractor, and you do not need to be exact. A common rough guide is to rest the edge on the stone and lift the spine a little, about the height of a couple of stacked coins, as a starting point. What matters far more than the exact number is that you hold whatever tilt you settle on steady, the same angle every single stroke. Draw the blade across the whetstone, edge leading in smooth, full-length passes, light pressure, letting the stone do the work rather than forcing it. Cover the entire edge from heel to tip and keep the surface wet. Stay on that one side until you feel the burr rise along the whole opposite edge. Then flip and work the other side the same way until the burr forms back on the first. Move to your finer stone or the fine face of a two-sided stone and repeat with lighter strokes to polish the edge and chase that burr down. A few last gentle passes or a stroke or two on a leather strop or even the back of an old belt knocks off the final whisker of burr and leaves the edge clean and keen. And here, at last, is the one step I promised you back at the start. The thing you do to the stone, and not the knife, that almost nobody does anymore. Remember how the stone works. It gives up a thin layer of itself as it cuts, and that shedding is the whole reason it stays sharp. But it also means the stone slowly wears down where you use it most, right through the middle into a shallow hollow. My grandmother's stone was dished in the center, and now you know exactly why. Here is the trap that hollow sets. Try to sharpen a straight blade on a stone that has gone concave, and the middle of your edge never properly meets the surface. You round the edge instead of sharpening it, you fight the thing the entire time, and after 10 miserable minutes, you decide the whole idea is a scam and go buy the plastic gadget. That is the precise moment most people give up on the stone and never come back to it. And the fix takes about 2 minutes. Every so often you flatten the stone, rubbing it back to true against something harder and dead flat. A cheap diamond plate, a dedicated flattening stone, or a sheet of wet sandpaper laid on a piece of glass until the hollow is gone. Then it cuts straight and honest again. So the very thing that looks like the stone wearing out, the dishing, the surface slowly vanishing, is the stone doing its job. A whetstone is meant to be used up a little at a time, The day it stops wearing is the day it stops working. Keep it flat, and one stone will keep a lifetime of knives keen. Before you run out and buy one, I owe you the truth about what a stone will not do, because a channel like this is only worth anything if it stays straight with you. First, there is a real learning curve. Your first few edges will be mediocre, and that is normal. It takes most people a good stretch of practice, a dozen or two sessions, before the angle lives in your hands and the results turn genuinely keen. This is a skill, and like any skill, it pays you back slowly. Second, it is slower than dragging a knife through a gadget. Sharpening a blade properly on a stone takes a few quiet minutes, not a few seconds. For a lot of people, that is part of the pleasure, but it is fair to know it going in. Third, and I want to be plain about this, the stone wears out too in the end. A synthetic water stone gives up a little of itself every time you use it and every time you flatten it, and over years of steady use it slowly grows thinner, until one day, well down the road, it is worn too far to keep and you replace it. A natural stone can last a generation or more, but even that wears, and even that needs flattening. Nothing here is permanent, and anyone who promises you a stone that never wears down is selling you a story. What is true is plenty. One stone will see you through decades and a great many knives for around $30 spent a single time. Then a couple of honest cautions. Very hard modern super steel knives can want a harder stone or a diamond plate to bite properly. A flat stone will not sharpen a serrated bread knife. That is a different job altogether. And the edge you are building is genuinely sharp, so keep your fingers well clear, move slowly, and never rush it. So why did a $30 stone that does the job better slip out of almost every kitchen? Part of it is a quiet change in how the skill got sold to us. Sharpening by hand was recast, little by little, as a fussy, mysterious art, something only a trained chef or a purist with a drawer full of stones could ever manage, while the pull-through gadget was sold as the sensible, modern, effortless choice for normal people. Reach for the stone and you were being precious. Reach for the gadget and you were being practical. That reframing did most of the work of pushing the stone to the back of the drawer, and underneath it, as usual, sits the money, though not in the way a conspiracy would have it. Nobody banned the stone, nobody hid it. It is simpler and a little sadder than that. There is very little profit in a plain gray stone you buy one time and keep for decades. There is a great deal of profit in the powered machine on the counter, in the plastic gadget you rebuy when it wears out, in the service that bills you every few months, and most of all, in the new knife you go out and buy when the old one dies young. The money flowed steadily toward the things you replace, and away from the one thing you keep. And that plastic gadget was never really saving your knives. It was quietly grinding them away. This is the part of it I care about most. A whetstone is one of the very few things left in a kitchen that you can genuinely hand down. Look after it, keep it flat, and it will outlast the hands that taught you to use it and be ready for the next pair. The skill travels with it. Learn to put an edge on one knife this year. Really learn it. And you have not just spared yourself a drawer of gadgets. You have something worth passing to a son or a granddaughter, the way it was passed to me at that sink, without anybody thinking it needed writing down. It came within one generation of being lost. That does not have to be how it ends. So let me ask you one thing in the comments. What is the oldest tool still working in your kitchen? The knife or the pot or the pan that has been with you longest? And whose hands did it come from before yours? I would like to know what has lasted in your house and who you got it from. And if you want the next one, subscribe. This is a small and growing habit. A few of us quietly taking back the plain, buy once skills our grandparents never thought were skills at all. Next, I am staying with the same idea, keeping a thing whole instead of throwing it out, but moving from steel to cloth. It is called sa-shi-ko, The plain running stitch mending that worked over a patch behind a worn spot, the Japanese used to reinforce a tired or torn garment so the mend held, as well as the cloth around it, sometimes better, right where it had failed. They even had a name for a piece mended and patched that way so many times it became something all its own: bo ro. Same family of old knowledge, same few dollar logic. So this week, buy the one stone, learn the one skill, and start keeping your knives instead of replacing them. Kept, not replaced.